Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, What's a Philosophy Degree Worth? In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what can you do with a philosophy degree, 7 jobs for philosophers. Now, so you just graduated with a degree in philosophy, but you don't know what to do with it. Or maybe you just quit your job and you're looking for a new job that might actually use your philosophy degree. Or perhaps you're a holdover from the last video and are still deciding if you want to major in philosophy based on your career options. Well, look no further. Today we're going to be looking at 7 great careers for philosophy majors. So, before looking into some specific careers, there's a common misconception we should address, that philosophy majors don't make any money. While initially following undergraduate school, philosophy majors do often make less than other majors. Once they hit mid-career, philosophy majors are making around $81,000 a year on average. That's more than business management majors, chemistry majors, and any other humanities major. What accounts for this change in fortunes? Now, some philosophers might tell you that this is an initial bias against philosophy majors, and once the potential for critical thinking is seen, they get a raise. But there is a much more mundane theory to explain this. Many philosophers go on to get professional degrees in law, government, or business. They're not earning money in graduate school, so their earnings look low. But once they graduate, they make a substantial amount more money since they're working as lawyers, bureaucrats, or entrepreneurs. Philosophers do often go on to get Juris Doctorates, Masters in Public Policy, or Masters in Business Administration to advance their careers. Meaning that this increase in a mid-career salary may be a feature of philosophers going into fields that require additional higher education. So, example of a field that might require some additional higher education, of course, is a lawyer. Philosophy is a very common pre-law degree, and going into law is a very common profession for people with philosophy degrees. In 2021, philosophy majors scored the second best on the LSAT of any major, behind only economics majors. Practicing law is in many ways similar to doing philosophy. It requires substantial reading of highly technical, often esoteric documents. It requires making arguments to defend your point, both in writing and out loud, even using thought experiments to get your point across. See, of course, the philosophy major, Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer's thought experiments in oral arguments about marshmallow guns, aspirin fingers, and tomato children that sound like they belong certainly in a philosophy classroom. It deals with issues of ethics and justice firsthand. Some philosophers might shun law out of a concern that corporate lawyers do more harm than good in the world. But there are many lawyers that at least have the opportunity to do good, from prosecutors and public defenders to class action lawyers that represent individuals against large corporations. Bureaucrats are another place that philosophers can find a home, such as government policy officers. Bureaucrats often get a bad name, but public policy is another common career for philosophy majors. Unlike businesses that need only to concern themselves with pursuing profit, governments are, at least in theory, trying to do good for their people. Philosophers understand how to balance multiple ethical maxims and engineer creative solutions to complex problems. Public policy works best by consensus, and philosophers are uniquely able to persuade and offer substantive arguments for and against particular policies. Many of the detailed decisions about how government programs are run are made by lower-level policy officers or policy analysts, instead of elected officials who are more concerned with setting a general direction and publicizing their accomplishments. Philosophers can understand the many ethical ramifications of a policy decision and implement them in ways that do the most good. If anything, public policy would likely benefit from more philosophers with an eye for ethics and justice in their ranks. Fitting again with both the ability to persuade and the focus on ethical solutions to problems, philosophy majors can excel at nonprofit work, where the focus is on doing good. Development directors, of nonprofit organizations, raise money for projects from donors. If you're inspired by, say, the works of Peter Singer, who has used philosophy to push an ethical mandate for giving, you might excel at a development director role for a nonprofit, using your background in philosophy, ethics, and persuasion to get the rich and famous to donate to your cause. On the subject of persuasion, another career for philosophy majors to consider is working in advertising or marketing. The goal of many of these jobs is to quickly and succinctly communicate an argument for why a particular product would serve a customer. Philosophers have the skills to boil complex ideas down to their essential components and present short, accessible cases for why you should accept them. And what are many advertisements but thought experiments? Both often start with imagine a certain situation. Imagine that you're in a particular situation where a certain argument would be satisfied, or you would need a particular product. Going into advertising, both using persuasive skills, but also using the skills of crafting convincing and entrancing thought experiments, is a great connection to the world of marketing and advertising. Now, is your background in philosophy more focused on things like symbolic logic? Do your philosophy papers look more like math than philosophy? Then you might consider becoming a software engineer or a programmer. Programming at its core is based on logic. 1 and 0 are simply an evolution of true and false. Boolean operators to run computations are the ones and zeros are central to both fields. Temporal logic is not just a fancy of philosophers, but some components of it, such as linear temporal logic, are actually used in computer science. Many programming languages can easily be learned online, and with a background in logic, you already have a leg up on learning these languages and possibly moving into a career as a software developer, a career that's definitely in vogue and often has need these days, and certainly makes a lot of money. Now, perhaps the most obvious career for philosophy majors is to research philosophy and teach it to others. This usually requires a PhD in philosophy to do, but if you want to devote your life to just learning about teaching and doing philosophy, this can be a really good choice. Since there are a lot fewer professorships than philosophy students, and even fewer philosophers that become famous or well recognized, this can be a difficult path to pursue. But if you really love doing pure philosophy, it can also be very rewarding. The last job you might consider requires a good deal of initiative to pursue well, but it can be very satisfying. It's what I do. Philosophy is very complicated, but it is essential for daily life. Everyone makes many ethical choices on a daily basis. We listen to arguments that may or may not be fallacious. We form opinions about what really exists in the world. But not everyone has the time or money to get a philosophy degree. That's where philosophy communicators come in, people who are able to take complex ideas in philosophy and communicate them to the public. I'll be the last to say that making philosophy videos on YouTube or writing broadly accessible pop philosophy books is a particularly lucrative career, but there are many societal benefits of teaching others about philosophy, and it can be a great side hustle. Now, speaking of side hustles, I want to give a big thank you to Hendrik MacDonald for supporting Carneades.org on Patreon since 2016. Being a philosophy communicator certainly isn't lucrative, but you can help it be slightly more lucrative if you want to support the channel and on Patreon and get access to Patreon exclusive posts for just $2 a month, less than the price of buying a cup of coffee. If you want to support public philosophy and you want to make it more viable for philosophers out there to be philosophy communicators and to explain some of the complex ideas of philosophy to folks out there like you, please do consider donating. Particularly if you are a philosophy major that has one of these high-earning, lucrative careers that we've talked about. If you have a philosophy degree, what careers have you had? Are there any that I missed that are particularly good for philosophy majors? If you are considering a philosophy degree, do any of these careers sound appealing? Are there other careers you might want to learn about? Leave all your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe if you want to catch the rest of the videos in this series. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.